This is Apropos. Well, Turkish opposition leaders are denouncing what they say is the ill treatment of students who've been arrested as part of the mass protest movement that's gripped the country since the arrest of President Erdogan's main rival, the mayor of Istanbul, nearly 2 weeks ago. The crackdown is also stoking distrust among Kurds who are anxious to see what a fragile peace process may bring. Cami Knight has the latest.
As Kurds in Turkey celebrate the arrival of spring, the future of their status in the country still hangs in the balance. It was less than a month ago that President Recep Tayyip Erdogan welcomed a call from the PKK's jailed leader to lay down arms, a move that many had hoped would pave the way towards the resolution of a decades-long conflict.
They saw it as an opportunity for peace and for Turkey to become more democratic. Of course, our people have expectations. They took the first step, but they also want a step to be taken by the government.
The pro-Kurdish DEM party says it's being kept in the dark about any potential reform roadmap. A meaningful peace process would have far-reaching implications, including the formal recognition of minority rights.
We want education in our mother tongue. We want to live freely in our country. We want our children to live in a free environment and in peace. We're old now. We want a future for the children.
The recent imprisonment of Erdogan's main political opponent has cast a shadow over any prospect of open political dialogue. Ekrem İmamoğlu's arrest earlier this month has sparked the largest protest movement Turkey has seen in over a decade. Opposition parties, students and labour unions joining forces to flood the streets. In response, Turkish authorities have intensified their crackdown, arresting thousands of individuals.
Our friends are being arrested and sent to prison because we are protesting. I want to condemn this. We are students. We are not terrorists.
Despite the government's efforts to suppress dissent, the CHP party has called for weekly rallies, as well as a boycott of companies perceived as close to the president.
Well, for more, let's bring in Aslı Aydıntaşbaş, visiting fellow at the Brookings Institution. Aslı, thanks so much for being with us on the programme this evening. Let's start with the crackdown on protesters. Why exactly is this happening now? Is Erdogan simply taking advantage of the wider geopolitical situation, do you believe, or are domestic issues playing more of a role here?
Look, there's been very little reaction from the world outside, maybe a performative mumbling from Brussels. And here in Washington, D.C., Marco Rubio was meeting Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan a couple of days ago, and he talked about expressing concern about the protests in Turkey, but it's not clear that that's exactly how he raised it. And when he was asked again, he said he was concerned about stability in Turkey. So that's a very, very different emphasis, of course. So I think the Turkish authorities can really read the room, so to speak, and understand that the world is going through such a crushing geopolitical environment that there may not be much of a pushback from the West. And this is something that may lead to, I think, further crackdowns. On the other hand, we're also seeing the main opposition party, CHP, wanting to wrap up the protests. They don't want to continue at this intensity. They want to settle on a pace that makes sense, that is sustainable, and not have one or two protests or street demonstrations that can be manipulated maybe. Instead, they want to do this in a more organized manner and in a manner that prevents sort of crackdowns, so to speak. So I think there's a lot of soul searching inside CHP to see what form is more sustainable and protects the protesters from arrests, detention, and so on. It's not an easy situation for anybody.
And Aslı, you've pointed out as well that the arrest of the Istanbul mayor, it came after the first phone call had taken place between Erdogan and Donald Trump. And you've compared the international reaction, you referred to the reaction there, to what we saw back in 2013 to that protest movement. So what does the difference in approach tell us about Turkey's current standing in the world?
Back in 2013, there was a massive urban protest, started in Istanbul but spread across the country. It was smaller in size than what we're currently seeing. I have to point that out. But what you had was maybe a dozen times a day statements from Washington and Brussels and warnings and phone calls and sort of a very clear stance from European leaders and EU institutions that they felt that peaceful protests should be allowed and that the Turkish government should actually hear the opposition, what the opposition or what the streets were saying. So it's a very, very different climate. That was around a time when Tahrir Square happened in Egypt, when Maidan uprising took place in Ukraine against Russia's attempts, and in Gezi, that's when Turkey was still at least saw its future in the European Union. This is a different climate, of course, both internationally, but in terms of where Turkey sees its future.
And do recent events suggest then that there's been some kind of a critical shift underway in terms of democracy then in Turkey? And where does all of this leave the opposition?
I think the opposition has a very tricky role to play. To his credit, the CHP leader, the leader of the main opposition party, Özgür Özel, has really grown in size in terms of his leadership over this past 10 days. People have come to appreciate the role he has played, both in terms of speaking out, perhaps the sentiments on the street, but also making sure that the street does not become the sole avenue of protest and criticism. And I think that the opposition will now hold a party congress, party convention. The reason they want to hold it is because the prosecutors are saying the previous convention, which saw the end of Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu period, a very ineffective period, is invalid. They're saying that Ekrem İmamoğlu played a role in buying that convention. These charges are yet to be fully announced by prosecutors. We don't really know what the full charges are, but CHP has gone ahead and is saying, you know what, we're going to hold our convention again. So we're going to see an internal struggle inside CHP for leadership, but we're also going to see an effort to create a situation over the next 2-3 years, whenever the elections are, to create a model of sustainable resistance to what is going on.
And Aslı, the Kurdish community would normally vote with the opposition. What is the situation currently for them? The crackdown appears to be making people anxious, really, about the fragile peace process and where that's going to go amid all of this.
Exactly. Kurds are really between a rock and a hard place. They have a very, very difficult dilemma. For the first time in a decade, the government is now talking about a peace process which started with secret talks with Abdullah Öcalan, imprisoned PKK leader. And this is huge. This is huge for Kurds. Of course, they've been paying a political price. Many Kurdish politicians continue to be in jail, and they are interested in exploring this option. On the other hand, they look at what is happening in Turkey right now and very much doubt, I think, that there could be a democratic opening. But they don't want to. I think they've stayed away from protests, from the streets, but they've expressed their opposition to what is happening. The question is, will Kurds continue to side with the opposition parties, with the opposition with Ekrem İmamoğlu, as they have over the past decade? And over the past decade, they voted for a policy which was to defeat Erdogan. Now they have to choose between that policy and potentially a peace process with Erdogan. And it's a very difficult choice for every individual, and particularly the Kurdish political party. They don't want to lose once in a lifetime historic opportunity, if there is one, but they are not entirely certain that there is one. So I think the next couple of months will also be critical in terms of them, the Kurdish political party, deciding what to do.
How polarised then is Turkish society overall, and how popular is Erdogan currently?
President Erdogan, no doubt, is one of the most popular, historically speaking, one of the most popular Turkish politicians, and he continues to be popular. But there is also no doubt that his popularity has been waning, has been in decline, especially because he's been in power for so long, and also because Turkey is undergoing a very severe economic downturn. So in the recent protests, we have a very clear indication from polling that almost 73% of Turks are opposed to what is happening. That doesn't mean 73% are on the streets. Some of them are just opposed to what's happening. That doesn't mean they change their party affiliation. It doesn't mean they will necessarily vote against Erdogan, but they don't think this is democratic or fair. Now, we are seeing wide range of people, a wide cross-section of Turkish society on the streets. Certainly students, yes. A lot of young people, including from, urban, historically poor neighborhoods in urban cities, but also pensioners. Old people that are very disgruntled, and maybe they have less to lose, they feel. So there's an interesting mix on the streets in what is opposing, in addition, of course, to the CHP's traditional base of urban secularists.
And you've also suggested that Erdogan, in terms of the wider geopolitical situation, Aslı, that he perhaps sees an opportunity here for a reset in relations with the West.
Look, Turkey is in between two hot wars, one in Gaza, one in Ukraine, and it has the ability to have an impact on both of these wars. President Erdogan has leveraged his relations between Russia and the West and Europe. He's been playing this incredibly interesting balancing act and has done it skillfully enough that now he has United States, Europe, and Russia wanting to continue relations with him. There is also a new situation with Trump administration being in power and Europeans wanting understanding that they cannot count on United States for Europe's security in the long run, even after a ceasefire in Ukraine. So I think Turkey is now appearing as an interesting partner, potential partner for Europe, for European countries, for NATO and the EU, both in terms of post-war European security architecture and as perhaps a defense industry supplier, a weapons supplier for Europe at a time when European countries are finding it more difficult to transition to a war economy, to produce defense industrial output at the level that they need. Turkey continues to have a very, very robust defense industry at home. It's never actually left the war footing. So I think that Europeans are now thinking of Turkey perhaps potentially playing a role to fill that gap until they can produce their own weapons. So this is historically a very interesting time for Turkey, and President Erdogan is able to use that external momentum to an extent to sort of buy silence from the West, for events that are happening domestically.
Aslı Aydıntaşbaş, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thanks so much for being with us. Well, that is it from us for now. Stay with us, though, for more world news.